I'm Jessica Bishop.
Yeah.
And you're listening to... That's no problem. You're listening to Through Dangers Untold, a monthly art podcast about traversing the precarious gap between art school and a professional sustainable art career. And what are we working on this week, Vickie?
Week, I have been struggling my way through Mermaid, but I am having a lot of fun with it actually as a drawing challenge. I'm using it to kind of get back to doing some traditional art, and kind of working with my Copics again, which has been really fun. But yeah, that's kind of like the biggest thing. I'm giving myself a little break this week.
Nice. Jess?
I'm still working on my illustrations, and I'm working on a new game project now, which I'm not going to talk about, but I'm working on it.
Oh, cool.
That's it.
Right? Like super, super mysterious.
Ooh.
Intriguing. I have finished Quaint Spirits. Yes. It is 3 years of a project that I worked on. I still haven't posted the last painting because I've been setting up my Redbubble shop, trying to get my drawings up on my website for sale and get the originals photographed and up for sale. So I've been waiting to post all the finished paintings until I get that up so that people know that it's all available. But I did finish all the paintings. It's 27 paintings. I learned a ton about painting and about color, about painting faces. It's all elf portraits, and I learned just so much. And so it's kind of weird to not have that project. I have another project I want to get started soon, but I'm kind of taking a little break also, like Vickie, and painting some mermaids as well. And I have a painting that I'm working on now. I'm going to just paint it through the whole month because I don't know if I'll be able to get more than one done. But yeah, so I'm painting a mermaid right now, and that's what I'm doing. So,
I should probably do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. 3 years.
I know. It's so long. But yeah, it's been a great learning experience. So, yeah. So we should probably move on to our topic today. So today it's kind of a abstract kind of topic. We're talking about finding meaning in art, fulfillment, challenge, inspiration. It's something that I don't think they talk about a lot in art school because you're so desperate to get the basics in. And I think even when you're starting out these first few years, you're still desperately trying to get those basics in and technique and strategy and business. But I think it's important to talk about early on because without it, why are we doing this? You know, without finding meaning, what's the point? So I would love to hear about both of your perspectives on how you do that or how you find inspiration, how you find meaning, and your experiences with that. So anybody want to start?
I want to hear from you guys first since I did so much talking last time.
You did do a lot.
I guess it's me then, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay. Well, that's definitely an issue that I go back and forth on myself all the time, especially depending on my mood, because, sometimes I sit back and think about it. I'm like, does anyone really care? No, they don't, actually. But then it's about finding time or meaning within yourself of, well, does this make me happy? Why does it make me happy? And like you were saying, in art school, a lot of times they don't really talk about it. I feel like they might in more fine art programs, potentially, since we did illustration. But also, like, the thing about college is I do think it's kind of their role to help you get a job. afterwards, because that's why people go to college. And I think a lot of times no one's worried half the time when they're in college about, finding meaning within themselves as much as they're like, how am I going to do this thing that I like to do and make it into cash? Mm. And oftentimes you have to put aside your own meaning for that just to make a buck. Mm-hmm. Especially if you start making art that you actually don't even agree with, but it's good money. And so I think there's something to be said for trying to keep your morale up for personal art.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting perspective. So instead of pursuing your personal work more as an income-driven thing, more as a way to just keep your sanity, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of talking in general, because with myself, I, for some reason, never cared about making money, even though I went to college for it. Like, I wanted to make money, but I just kind of figured if I'd figured out what I was good at, I'd figure out how to make the money. That could happen still. Mm-hmm. Get back to you on that. But I think it's hard. It's hard to figure out, like, if no one else cares, why do I do this?
Yeah.
And that's something that everyone kind of has to answer personally, but I know through most of my years of existence I've never really had a real answer to that question, other than when I'm not doing art or, reading or something, keeping myself busy. I'm like, what's the point? Like, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. I don't know what else to do. Yeah. It seems like the only option. So I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's a good question. Definitely. And I feel a lot the same.
Yeah. Especially when you're faced, like, some artists get really lucky, and, this two sides to every coin, of course, but they get a lot of feedback. They get really good feedback, and that kind of keeps the morale going, I think. Mm-hmm. Where they're like, I'm making this because people like it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's really awesome when that happens. But it doesn't always happen, and you have to learn to keep doing something without the gratification of other people. And that's true for, I'd say, most artists. I mean, we all know how many artists died before they got famous, so
that's true.
Why'd they keep doing it?
That is a really interesting question, and I think what you're saying there too, with people get caught in this loop where they end up making art that they may not necessarily like because they're getting that feedback response where a lot of people are liking that. I mean, I've definitely seen artists post about that where they're like, oh, I'm getting all these likes, I'm making a lot of money even, but I hate painting it. And so it's that interesting, it's like a catch-22 almost, because on one hand, if you're not getting that feedback and you are kind of creating in a vacuum, which I feel a lot, and it sounds like you do too, Jess, you do have that question of like, okay, why am I doing this? What is this for? What's the purpose of the art? Will anybody care? So you, like you said, you have to find that self-motivation. But yeah, I can also see the other side being a problem too, especially if you want to break off and do something that is more meaningful, or maybe avant-garde, or maybe outside of your regular style, but will mean more to you, and then you risk losing that monetary thing. I think that's a hard choice too.
Exactly. It's kind of interesting too, when you go back to some of the first quote unquote masters. A lot of it wasn't necessarily about art. I mean, they were commissioned to do it, but there weren't a lot of artists. And a lot of them, like Da Vinci is a good example. He was also a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of thing that I find also very interesting. And then it's a lot of those old projects, I mean, they were all funded for the church. And before that, if you want to go back even farther, I mean, why did they do cave paintings? They were probably trying to record information of some sort, visual signs or something. Of course, we don't know that, but it's interesting to look back on history and see how art has evolved. Because another thing, we have pictures now.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the point of painting something, at least for the general public? It's like, why do I need a painting of something anymore? It's weird. And it can definitely get you down really, really quick.
Like one thing, kind of going back to what you were saying about like, you do have an audience and they're kind of making money off of something that they know is popular, that they know is working. I feel like I've kind of seen the sort of, I guess, like, this model of like people using what's popular to gain traction, to build their audience, to kind of get that recognition, and then kind of like audience to follow them into their work that is more important to them as an artist. And like, I think that happens in any creative industry in terms of like people like being like, okay, I'm going to do this thing that's kind of following the mainstream, that's following this sort of like, and then once you build an audience, it's sort of like, okay, well, what if I try to do this other thing that I think is really cool? And I think there is absolutely a risk of like losing some of the audience, but I think because you might already have some recognition, even across people who might not follow you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like it might be easier to gain new people in your audience through that. I mean, but that is at a point where you're already at like a fairly high status, I think, where you already have a huge enough following to like be considered like an influencer.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
I feel like you'd have to be, I don't know, because at the same time, people are just so judgy. I feel like a lot of people really know that if they change what they're doing, depending on how drastic of a change they want to make, they are going to lose money. And like, I think that would be hard if you're in a situation where you can't afford to lose the money for a while. So I'm not countering you. I'm just being like, that's kind of sad.
I definitely agree.
Well, but you're also talking about a pretty popular business model with a lot of modern artists, modern illustrators, where you can kind of plot out that trajectory of doing fan art, moving into doing more personal stuff. But you also see, I mean, I think a lot of times that's with people who are able to successfully navigate them, have a very distinctive and highly polished technical style, which they probably developed over doing the fan art, and then also very savvy social media and business skills. And then the thing that they're doing personal matches well enough with their existing fan art style that the transition isn't abrupt. Would you say that's what you're seeing, Vickie? Or am I totally like
probably
off base?
I think it's yeah. I think that's.
I've seen it.
I've
also seen it go the other way. Like, it's always still like you said, Sonnett, like a technical style, but I've seen a lot of people get popular kind of sometimes doing their own thing, and then they do more fan art to get, because it's, I don't know, I've just seen some of that recently and I don't really get it. I guess it's just they get more money, but
by doing the fan art?
yeah, like how we've talked about before, where there's a lot of like really talented, more famous or popular artists, and then now we've got a lot of these higher, not, I don't remember the right word right now, but like higher galleries, like having these fan art shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting trend too.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's definitely, I think overall like a thing that's a lot of factors to it. I mean, and certainly stuff that like I haven't experienced, more just things that like I've observed
Mm-hmm.
with certain people on social media and whatnot. I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I often wonder, like, this kind of relates, but is when you make art, whether it's fan art or it's not fan art, or if it's popular or it's not, if it only reaches you and no one else cares, which is how it happens with most of our art, is it the fact that it makes you happy, is that enough meaning for you?
I think so.
I
For
would
me,
think so too.
for me, that comes first.
Yeah.
Before anything. And, I mean, mind you, like, money is way important, and I want to be able to continue to do the art, and to be able to fund the art with financial, the financial part too, but I just think, like, for me, I'm the same way that you were saying, Jess. Like, I have to do the art, and I know not everyone is this way, and I also agree, I don't know if it's healthy, but I can't not do art. I have to. I've gone through years where I haven't done it, and I took breaks from it, and I was miserable. So I have to create in some way, shape, or form, and for me, art is the way I do it. But I think within that, it's easy to get caught up in a lot of different distractions, whether that's trying to make money, whether that's trying to be popular, trying to be liked, trying to get certain jobs, trying to catch the cultural zeitgeist, like whatever. It's easy to get distracted, or even technical. Like I will get distracted by technical stuff, because for me that's how I perpetuate challenge. Is by saying, okay, what am I working on in this piece? For what is the challenge? How am I improving my technical skill in this piece? I'm going to work on color theory, or I'm going to work on layout, or value, or painting better faces, or whatever. It's easy for me to get distracted by that. And sometimes I have to stop and think about that, because otherwise it just gets too dry, it gets too emotionless, it gets too impersonal. And then try to find ways to get back to personal. So go ahead. I'm talking too much. Go ahead, Vickie.
No, it's fine. I feel definitely similar. I think what happens to me is that sort of like the distraction, as you put it, becomes the sort of like business side of me wanting to kind of like be a better business person, because like that was not taught as much in like art school. But then anytime that like I'm not working on art, I feel like my head starts to overflow with like art projects that I want to do.
Yeah.
Which is like mentally exhausting, because I'm like, oh, I gotta write all these things down. And like
I feel sorry. I was just gonna say, like, I feel like what both of you are saying is that you both find meaning in the process of creation more than results.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I just think it's
was
a
like,
good juxtaposition. Like, because I think a lot of people, when they look at it, they're like, it's the result that matters. Like, how people react to it, how much money you make, do I get that job?
Mhm.
You know, am I going to get popular? And they don't find meaning within the process whatsoever.
I think that is definitely a good way to put it. I was definitely kind of like pausing because I was like, oh no, yeah, that totally makes sense. Especially in the idea of that kind of like that like stereotype of like artists never getting things done, and like it kind of being, I feel like one of the biggest things that like I heard a lot in art school was just like, it doesn't matter how good it is, like just get it done, just like finish work, just try to build your portfolio. And just like what you guys were saying earlier, a lot of that was geared towards, you know, like marketing yourself and being able to sell yourself to potential employers. And when you're creating, you're just kind of like, you just want to make stuff and you don't really care if it's finished, because you're just like, I just want to get this idea out till I'm kind of satisfied with it. And whether it's done or not, you know, that doesn't really matter, because I'm going to move on to the next idea that I have, which is what I do all the time, which is why a pile of unfinished work be great ideas if I go back to them and refine them, but I'm just like, oh, but I have this other idea though.
Me too.
Yeah, and there definitely is a lot of fulfillment in just like making that and just kind of being like, okay, I have this idea, I'm going to try to get it out. A certain like satisfaction that like the way you put that, just like it like made something click in my head.
It's interesting because I feel like when a lot of times I'll get to a point with a piece where I'll just be like, I'm done with this. Like, this is it. I'm going to do what I need to make it feel like it's finished and I can put it in my portfolio. But it doesn't mean I'm like happy with it. And sometimes like I'll put a piece away for months and then go back to it. But then, you know, there is a sense of relief upon finishing like a piece. But then there's also the sense of like despair. Like, how am I gonna start again? No.
Yeah.
And then you do. And then you get to the ugly phase and you're like, no, I'm done with you. It's just a circle.
A never-ending cycle.
That's why I'm so impressed in that aspect of when like artists make a series of any kind, like with Sonnett, with your series that you worked on for so many years now.
I know.
3 years.
I'm so stubborn. Like, I probably should have stopped it a long time ago, and I was like, no. I'm going to
finish a smaller sequence this time.
That's what David said. My husband, he was like, maybe you could do 4. And I was like, yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Give yourself a break.
See, because like what you guys are saying, like I relate to some, but also like I am such a completionist when it comes to painting. And I'm stubborn.
It's that technical thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am also in that camp, too. Like, with you, Jess, how I will go, okay, this is as far as it's going to go. Like, I know when a painting's done. I know, like, this is as much as I'm going to learn in this painting.
Yes, that's it.
I don't think I can work on this anymore without ruining it. You know, it's just, it's done. But then I mean, every painting is, I like this, I hate this, you know? Yeah. I hate all these other things. I'm going to do better next time. But I love this little part here. And so...
I'm the same way. And then I'll post things and then I delete them because I'm like, the shame.
Do you really?
No.
Really?
Is that bad? Does no one else do that?
Delete them, like, how?
Like on social media, like not like...
Really? Why?
Not like my file. I do that. I get so shameful.
Well, I mean, it's hard.
I guess I'm alone in this.
Well, are you talking about, like, older stuff? Are you talking
about...
Oh,
no.
Oh, Jess.
Sometimes I'll post stuff and then delete it like next week.
Wow.
Like, oh no.
Oh, Jess, don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, but I don't know. It's cathartic in some
Okay.
ways. I'm like, this is an evil thing. So evil.
You're like, out. You're dead to me painting.
And like, I know they're probably usually not as like bad as I think they are, but I think that's what like hurts me more often than not is not people's reactions or anything as much as like my own fear about creation and not living up to my own expectations.
Oh,
For sure.
So
yeah.
a lot of my like projects, like I feel like I don't finish them, like especially, you know, my game I've been working on for a year now. I'm like, I have gotten like very, very little done because I've got like a lot of it built up in my head and I know what it needs to be, but then I get scared and I back down.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, it's very difficult. So I'm taking a different approach right now, but that's besides the point. But I think that's another thing about doing art is just that oftentimes because we can't stop and we do find meaning in the process, it's like maybe I'll just think about this and attack it from a different way, like trying to overcome something when something means a lot to you. I don't know.
So I have a question, just jumping slightly, but it was kind of triggered by something you guys were saying earlier. When you guys are like working on stuff, whether it's just like sketches or like you want to start a new series of pieces or something, or just any new piece, do you go into it kind of like deliberately something to it just being like, I have this idea and I just need to get it done however I can get it done?
That changes for me, like depending on the project.
I go about it very deliberately, but I can go about it so deliberately that I suck all the joy out of it. Like I am super structured. Spreadsheets, thumbnails, all of it.
I am a terrible planner.
Like I have that sort of opposite problem where like I have an idea, say for just like a single illustration, planning in terms of like thumbnailing just to get composition down, but it's like I don't think I've ever gone into a piece thinking, oh, I want to learn something from this, or I'm going to try to practice this skill. It's more just like I have this idea and I need to figure out which to look good, like what medium is going to look good, which is why like my stuff kind of goes back and forth a lot between traditional and digital. Matter of convenience almost for me of like what like which tool is going to be the easiest to make this image. Like I never like deliberately try to learn, but I definitely come out of it realizing like, oh, this and it's always, I don't know, I guess like a pleasant surprise, but I'm always just kind of curious how other people go about that, because I feel like there's definitely artists that doing and they're like, yeah, you know, it's like I want to learn how to use gouache, so I'm gonna, you know, like try to mix these colors and try to do that. And it's like every time I try to do something like that for myself, I get bored.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's my like garbage attention span too.
Yeah.
Maybe you just do it subconsciously.
Maybe.
It's and that is okay. There are different artists for sure who do it different ways. Like no, not everybody has to paint 100, no, probably 1,000 squares of color. Like my OCD self. To try and get color theory and color mixing down. Like you should see how many pages I have of this, guys. It's not it's like scary amounts.
Yeah.
But I know how to mix color now. So
like I would love to like make myself do that so that I can, you know, go into like a new piece just kind of like knowing, almost just being like, yeah, I know how these colors look when they mix and I know how these colors mix and etc. But instead I'm just like, I'll just throw it down on paper and see what happens. And if I don't like it, I'll just color over it, is usually what I do. Which is why digital works so well for me, because layers.
I get it. Like, I often, the reason I think I like digital and pencil, and I used to do a lot of oil painting as well, is because it's easy to fix when you fuck up.
Yeah.
And Sonnett, you pick watercolor.
I mean, the hardest. Yeah, you have to plan everything, or else you're sad. Sad.
It's like, but I think you find enjoyment in the excessive planning.
I do. Structured, repetitive work is very peaceful and calming to me. So
that's how you do it.
My brain, it works. I find it very peaceful.
I think thing that eludes me a little bit when it comes to working in like water-based media, like working in gouache and working with watercolor, which I love the both of those, and like marker. But what I love is how chaotic they are, because it's just like, because I don't know what I'm doing, I just like throw stuff down on the paper and I'm just like, well, I hope this looks good. And then it looks weird. And then I'm just like, well, I'll just paint over that. And then I make something else that like I'm not planning, but I'm just like, it's not what I wanted, but I'm actually kind of happy with it.
Nice.
And like that
this
just
is interesting.
happens. Yeah, like that's how a lot of my work is, where it's a lot of, I guess, like Bob Ross style happy accidents.
Nice. That's awesome.
That man.
The best.
I feel like I'm the perfect mix between you two. Like, I can't just start doing something. I've got to plan a little bit. Like, I was that person in school who always made an outline before writing an essay, but my outline would be incredibly sparse. So it would, I'd just be like, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then I go through and fill it all out. But it wouldn't be super bulleted. So that's kind of how I relate it to art. I kind of make a general outline for myself and then I do it. So I can't have zero planning, but I have to have something. A guideline.
For sure. And like it's kind of weird because like people like planning to a degree, but like sometimes like the planning for me, or like say like a thumbnailing stage, will honestly just be to get like the bad ideas out of my head. I don't like any of these, but I found the good idea that I wanted and I'm just gonna jump into that.
That makes sense.
Too.
So I have an interesting question. This might be slightly off topic, but it's interesting. Like, for both of you, how long do you stay in the planning stage of a piece compared to the length it takes you to make the piece? You're laughing.
Well, immediately my brain is going to like what I need to do for this next big project that I want to do. And I'm like going through, I have to go through boxing for the framing for the shop and the backdrop and the props that are going to be photographed with the finished piece. What? And then I have to figure out the dimension because it fit into the frame.
Post-production here?
Yeah, I have to think of it beforehand.
That's part of your pre-production.
Yes, I have to think about it beforehand.
God.
Because the entire series is going to be a specific dimension so that I can print it on standard size posters and standard frames so I can get them cheaper, but also, it's easier for people to frame them. So like there's so much to think of, and as well as postage costs. So then I have to think about all that, and then I figure out the dimensions, and then I have to figure out okay, so that's like the shop side, and then I have to figure out my subject. So I'll usually listen to some music to get the emotion side of it, and then I'll do a bunch of thumbnails, and then I'll do color, and then I'll do value, and then I'll get references, and then I'll do the drawing, and then I do the transfer. and then I get to the painting.
Holy shit!
So a lot of hours. The painting, depending on the size, like if I'm doing a small 8x10 painting, I can probably finish that in 3 days at the most.
What I've learned from this is that we do not want Sonnett to commit a murder.
Oh,
The
my
plans
God.
will be intense.
I think you'd get away with it.
Oh dear.
What?
Anyway, sorry, go on.
My planning is like my process, which I mean isn't always a good thing. The more you plan, the faster you get your main work done.
I don't know though, like
No.
I miss the spontaneity sometimes. Like what you're talking about, I miss being able to do that, and I find it very difficult to get to that place these days. So
There's definitely, I think, a necessary balance that needs to be found in there. Because for me, my problem is that I get overwhelmed by ideas, and because I'm so disorganized, I have constant meltdowns because I want to do so much and can't figure out how I'm going to do them.
oh.
And so I'm constantly just like have like a week where I'm just like making a ton of stuff, but then after that it's kind of like crashing down from like a high.
I do
And
that.
Yeah. And then I'm just like, all right, ever again, I'm a terrible artist, and I spend like a week just like crying, and I'm just like, why did I even go to art school?
Oh no.
And then like the next week I'm just like, oh, I have this really great idea for a comic.
That's hard. I do the same exact thing where I'll have like a good streak for like a few weeks, and then I'll be like, I don't know anymore. And it's really emotional.
Yeah.
I just try to write everything down, I guess.
Yeah. I am a I guess like compulsive documenter. It's my entire life, because for some reason when I was a kid, like I was aware of my forgetfulness in a weird way, that in my head I framed it as like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna remember my childhood when I get old, so I'm gonna like keep a journal or whatever, or like make drawings about stuff so I don't forget them.
Oh.
Because of those types of habits, like I just like I have a need to document everything. And like making pieces, it's like I really like like time-lapse videos if I'm like really cool illustration, or when I was setting up the gallery at Columbia, it's like I always wanted to make sure that I had kind of like behind the scenes like setup footage, and like that kind of part, like recording the process of work, has always been really important to me. And I guess I don't know, like it feels almost like a middle ground between like the planning and the actual work, because it's kind of like where I was going.
I think that's really cool, though. Like,
Yeah.
with my planning process, it definitely overlaps, because I'll like plan for a little bit and think about it, and I'll have an idea, and then I'll like try to make a guideline sketch for it or whatever, and then get started. But then I'll be like, this is all wrong, and now I need to go think about this for a few days. And then like most of my thinking and planning, like I'm just like sitting on the couch staring. So
Same.
it's like, I don't know. I feel like they're both kind of, I spend an equal amount of time on both, I guess. But it spreads for longer than when I'm actually physically sketching or writing anything.
Interesting.
Like right now, I'm thinking about things.
Yeah. Well, I'm also kind of like looking back, like any time where think of stuff or trying to plan stuff out, and I think I mean I always kind of attribute it to like having a terrible attention span, um, or it could just be my is that like if I start planning something and I'm like, okay, I need to take a break and step away from it to kind of clear my head and maybe come back to it, I almost never come back to things because I just forget about them.
Huh.
It's really frustrating because I'll remember at the most inconvenient times that I had a cool idea of a thing that I wanted to do. Like this actually happened when I was preparing for the convention this past weekend. I made a list on Trello of like stuff that I wanted to get done, and like I never looked at it again. Convention when I remembered that I had it. Got like most of the things done, but there was a specific like mini like little zine that I really really wanted to do because I had started sketching it out a few weeks ago. Like this really cool idea that like I had to get done, but forgot about it. And then like when I was at the convention, I was just like, oh man, I wanted to do the zine and I didn't do it. And that is something that's very frequent for me, and it becomes very frustrating.
Yeah, that sounds frustrating.
I do have some suggestions for you. If we want to talk about them now, or I can give them to you later. But
I mean, they might be good suggestions for anyone.
Okay, I didn't want to get too far off topic, but I do some weird stuff to remember things. So I do have Trello boards, so I use those. I also write everything down in my sketchbook. I'll set alarms for myself about ideas that I have.
Nice.
And I'll come back to them later, but I often send myself text messages.
Mm-hmm.
I've never known anyone else that does that.
Okay.
But
I've
text messages and just be like, this idea. I'll basically write anything anywhere just to try to make myself remember things at specific times. It's definitely not foolproof, but
that makes sense. I've definitely tried stuff like that in the past. I think one thing that works for me times is like hangouts or just like in my text messages like to my husband, because he remembers stuff that I need to get done more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
I text him and I'll be like, remind me that I had this idea or that I wanted to do this thing. He will. Just because he's better about remembering things like that.
Nice.
I mean, even so, like my brain has this just like stubbornness about just listening to people. Like my brain is just very oppositional, and like the moment I hear someone being like, "Oh, don't forget you wanted to do that thing," and then my brain's like, I don't want to do it anymore.
That's funny.
Just like, wait, but I do want to do this. Why are you doing this?
Oh man,
it's very strange. It's something that I'm trying to work on, and it's definitely more of just like weird. I definitely appreciate like reminders, and I do like setting alarms for things, because those do help me a lot. At like specifically with like ideas like annotated on the alarms.
Nice. Yeah, timers are great. I use timers too, just to prevent myself from spending too much time planning. I'm like, I only get an hour for this. Okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I'll set a timer for myself. So yeah. But I wanted to go back a little bit. So I think it's hard when you're beginning to think about this stuff, because I know a lot of times the Ira Glass quote gets passed around the internet about your taste. You have great taste, but your skill it doesn't match up to your taste. I think in these first few years, you're in that stage where you know what you like, or you start to figure out, what you like, where you kind of want to head, probably how you want to improve, where you start to figure that out. But you start to cultivate that taste, and you start to see where other people are and where you kind of fit into it, and your skill just doesn't match up to it. So I think it gets kind of difficult, because then on top of it, you're asking these questions of, okay, how do I be vulnerable in my art? How do I be personal in my art? How do I paint things that are important to me? How do I be authentic? Maybe you're not asking those questions. I ask these questions of myself all the time.
Me too.
How do I get these things that I'm feeling onto the paper? And so much of it is struggling through that technical skill to get there, But I would be really interested in hearing about how you get yourself into that. Like, how do you get yourself out of your head? We talked about that with the alarms, and how you get inspiration, how do you find a way to that or through that? I would love to hear.
I think one of the biggest things, especially for me recently, kind of bringing it back to the overall main topic, as we're trying to do, pulling it out of worrying about standards of success, and that whole idea of like going back to like, why did you originally like making art? And for some people, who might have started like later in life, that might be a more defined reason. Like, for people like me in particular, like maybe you've just always enjoyed drawing, like it's what you did as a kid, and it's kind of just what you've always done. And for me, it's very much about getting back to that, like, because you feel good about it.
Yeah,
opens up a good flow for like creativity for me, and not worrying so much about like, oh, I should make this piece because I know people are gonna like it, because I definitely have those ideas, but it's just like when I try making them, they're so forced, and I don't even finish them, and I just throw them away because I'm just like, I don't care about this.
Right.
I think something that's helped me is like every piece that I've made, like as someone who goes to like conventions and stuff, sell everything that I've made as stuff that I'm happy with, even if it doesn't like quite feel done, or if it's not, like perfect or where I want it to be, I'm still happy with it. And I don't think I sell anything like, oh, I did it because, people told me it was good. Because I have a bad habit of not trusting people's opinions when they tell me something I make is good. Which is just, I mean, that's just like a general like self-esteem thing, I think. There is also a bit of kind of like trusting yourself and just being happy with what you're doing, or just doing because it feels good, which is kind of what like Mermaid has been for me. Interesting, because like since I've been doing it, it's just something I've been doing like rules almost. Like I chose how I wanted to make each drawing every day, and the drawings I've been making are better than I expected them to be. Like I've been happier with those than I've done in the last several months.
Nice. That's awesome.
Very rewarding.
What was your original question?
How do you find your way Two meaning
Okay.
How do you find your way? And two, your personal work, to art that has meaning for you and is authentic and personal for you.
Yeah, that one's a tough one. I think I've got two parts to it. The first one, which is a little different, is just that I've been working lately a lot with myself to try to accept when art isn't going well for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's because I'm trying not to feel any shame about that and not feel like I have to constantly produce and try to work with my brain changes. Like this week, my brain doesn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to accept that and try again later. Like just keep trying and you'll know when you feel up to it again and just not feeling guilty to yourself for that. And then I find working with that, I have less stress and I'm not making a bunch of crappy, angry work. If that makes sense. And also just in general, I think I've kind of learned that I like stories. So I guess it makes sense since we were illustration students and I was also a game student, but stories and that's kind of like what's most important to me about creating is trying to get like a point across, because for a long time I've been making a lot of art that doesn't have a story. It's just a thing. Mm-hmm. And that, like, even if like people liked it and it looked technically good, I wasn't happy with it because I'm like, I don't really have a meaning for this other than like it was cool to make, but that wasn't feeling enough for me. So now I'm trying to focus more on storytelling in itself because it makes me happier. So it's hard though, because it takes a long time to like really sit back and think about it, and also because meaning changes. So like I'm sure in another few years I'm going to feel differently.
Yes.
And I'm going to have to re-find it.
Yeah.
But it's also exciting, and it's good to try to look at it with a good outlook, positive one, optimistic. There we go. And not just dread it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, it definitely can change over time, and different situations. I think I really liked what you said about thinking about it. I think that's so important, checking in with yourself, thinking about as you're making the work, you know, is this what I like? Does this make me happy? Like you said about not doing stories. It's so important. And I think we've said it a lot on this podcast, just how many times you have to check in as an artist to what you're feeling and as you make the work and how you feel about the work. It's interesting how self-aware you have to be.
And it's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
It's so exhausting, right?
Some serious emotional labor.
It is emotional. Yeah, like it's definitely emotional. And it's scary. It's terrifying because there's always that risk when you with personal work that you are exposed as a person. And I think that's scary. I think that's terrifying. For me, that keeps me from doing personal work because I'm afraid that it'll be stupid. I'm afraid it'll be weird. I'm afraid the art will be too esoteric, that no one will like it. Sure. No one will understand it. That the things that are personal to me don't make sense to anyone else. You know, like there's so much to face with
I
those
totally
questions.
get that. And it's one of those things you just have to like, I mean, if you want to get past it, you just have to like sit back and really talk yourself through it. It's not easy. It's like you can tell yourself, stop caring about what those people think, but then it comes down to it and it's hard.
It is hard. Yeah, it is. And you're right, like it's about just pushing forward and doing it anyway. Well, and also like because you want to push forward to do it.
Yep.
But yeah, it's interesting. Definitely. Music helps me a lot. Like I said before. Sometimes listening to a certain kind of music helps me get into the emotion that I want to express better than other things. But I started
That totally makes sense.
Yeah, I started as a musician, so for me that means something. And I know not everybody is going to be that way. But yeah. Anyway, other thoughts about all this?
I feel like I covered my bases, what I wanted to cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a deep one. It's scary.
It's so scary. And I don't know. I don't hear a lot of people talk about it. It's always, most people just talk about how to make money because that's important. And but there's also this whole other side to it that just I think people don't like talking about it. It's not easy to talk about.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy conversation to have, and it makes people uncomfortable, and like, because the sort of like self-care aspect of being an artist, and in general, people don't like talking about self-care because self-care doesn't, it keeps you alive, and that's important.
So important. Yeah, and honestly, I would say that the people that end up innovating in most industries, and including art, are the ones that do find that kind of lightning in a bottle of being authentic, of I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, luck and business sense and all that, and those are all part of it. Who connections, all of it. It's all part of it. Being in the right place at the right time. There's so much. But I don't think they can succeed if they're fake. Yeah. Like most successful YouTubers, like that I watch, and just artists that are super successful that I follow. It just seems that the ones that do the best, are most innovative, change the industry, do new things, push the genre, are those that are in touch with that, and in touch with that authenticity and personal voice. So I don't know. So there's still money to be made in it. You just gotta get there.
Totally. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say in a long roundabout way.
Yes, I agree.
Anyway.
The advice that I would always give to someone, and I've followed this advice, or at least I've tried to for the most part, is just do what you want. Like, don't worry about the money, which is easy to say, but like, you can do something else to make money if you want to, if you need to.
Totally.
Like, just stop. Just try your best to like take a step back and realize, like, do I like doing this, or do I think people want to see this, or do other people like me doing this? Like, and always just reevaluate that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to go when it comes to finding meaning in what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, this was an awesome conversation. I thank you for sharing your thoughts tonight. Anything else you want to talk about before we close up the evening?
No.
We're good.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Through Dangers Untold. And I actually, really quickly, before I finish up, I do want to say we have a YouTube channel now. And it's just Through Dangers Untold Podcast is how you can search for it. And Through Dangers Untold is our username. So we have previous episodes up. And we'll be continuing to upload new episodes as we record them. So that's a great way to follow us. And we also have a website. So we'll link to those in the chat after we're done here. And also, so you can find old episodes there. And yeah, please check those out. Our logo was created by Karen Hodo, and you can find her online at kmhododesigns.com. And you can find me at sonnettshelline.com. And also, I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And where can they find you? Vickie?
So I can be found anywhere on the internet as Vixtifer. My website is vixtifer.com. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Vixtifer, and on Facebook.com/.
You can find me everywhere at JRU Bishop, which is just my initials and last name.
All right, and join us next month. We haven't decided on our next topic yet, so we'll be deciding that and then announcing that. So please join us next month. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you then.
Okay.